welcome to your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand, excited to be here today. Hope you guys are as well. Got a lot to talk about today, as we often do. Chip Scoggins will join me shortly to run down, I think, 4 of the biggest questions in Minnesota sports right now. We're going to tackle all 4 of those in a really fun segment, so I hope you guys enjoy that. Going to get to the Deshaun Watson trade proposals that are starting to feel a little bit like Herschel Walker trade proposals. But first, what did I miss? Well, it's the story that keeps coming this week. Timberwolves make their debut under new head coach Chris Finch on Tuesday night in Milwaukee. Guess what? It didn't go all that well. The Wolves lose 139 to 112, basically laying bare to pretty much all of their problems right now. And again, it's one game. When in the past, when the Wolves have made a trade or made a big shakeup and gotten big results right away, I think last year was a good example when they made all those trade deadline moves and then went out and routed the Clippers. I have cautioned before, don't get too high. We've seen this happen before. Give it some time. Make sure this is the real deal and not just a one-game mirage. So we do need to do that after the blowout loss to Milwaukee. It is just one game. They're still figuring out how they're going to play under Chris Finch. They're still, it's kind of a shock to the system. I mean, 48 hours before tip-off of that game, they were playing the Knicks in New York, and Ryan Saunders was still their head coach. That said, all the problems of the roster, and and in some cases, the mismatch between the roster and the style they want to play were laid bare. Giannis just ran through them, and he does that to a lot of teams, but they have nobody that is physically able to stop Giannis. And that's the thing that Finch noticed right away, the lack of physicality on this team. He said that in his post-game remarks, that they just don't have anybody that can stand up to anybody physically, at least nobody that's really in the current rotation. So you got that problem. But the bigger thing is the way the Wolves want to play doesn't match the roster that they have, right? And I think you saw more of the way they play, more of the way they want to play with Chris Finch in the mix. I think Alan Horton, the radio guy for the Timberwolves, does a great job. Had a tweet after the game, the Chris Finch effect. Pace, 106 possessions, third highest of the season. 3-pointers, 54 3-pointers attempted, franchise record. Karl-Anthony Towns, 26 points, 11 assists, creating 57 points. A lot of those assists led to threes, obviously. That is a season high. All of those, or I should say that the Towns mark is definitely positive, right? Because going in, I think what I even talked about on Tuesday's podcast was how you could see this becoming Cat's team again, that they were going to play through him, that there was going to be no question that this is his team, that they want to do that on offense. And I think you saw that, the beginnings of that on Tuesday, so I think that's positive. I don't even think shooting that many threes is a bad idea if you have a team that can shoot 3-pointers. The Timberwolves are 20th in the league this season in 3-point efficiency, a little over 35%. That is below the league average. They take 54. They only make 19 last night. That's right around their season average of 35%. It's not terrible, but you can't win that way, especially when you go doing it, creating 106 possessions. Because guess what? Here's the real problem with playing fast when you're not a very good team and you don't shoot 3-pointers very well. The other team gets a lot of possessions, and that's how Milwaukee gets 139 points, and they wind up making 20 of their 42 3-pointers. Yeah, they tried 12 fewer threes. They made 1 more 3 than the Timberwolves did in that game. So to me, the real problem is that the roster doesn't match the way they want to play. And again, it's still under construction. They're still trying to get in more and more of the types of players they want. D'Angelo Russell, whenever he gets healthy, that will help the 3-point shooting to a degree. The Malik Beasley signing certainly helped that. Having Cat healthy, now again will help that. But it still remains a fact that inside strength and 3-point shooting were deficiencies when Gerson Rosas took over this job as president almost 2 years ago, and they remain deficiencies right now. And you can't play the way they want to play if you don't have those two things. You can hire any coach you want. They've certainly hired 10 of them in the last 15 years, tried 10 of them in the last 15 years. Until you get the personnel in place to play the way you want to play, no coach is going to make that much of a difference.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to be joined right now by Star Tribune columnist Chip Scoggins. Chip, a lot of stuff going on in Minnesota sports. I don't. When we booked this originally, I don't think we thought we'd be talking about right off the bat the Wolves making a coaching change. But that's not all we're going to talk about today. We want to run down kind of the biggest questions in Minnesota sports right now. We'll hit some Vikings stuff, some Twin stuff, and some Gophers basketball stuff. But we do need to lead off right now with the Timberwolves, who made a major shakeup, firing Ryan Saunders as head coach Sunday, making it official Monday morning that they had hired Chris Finch for the rest of this season and beyond. First of all, Chip, your gut reaction to the move and what you think it means contextually.
Well, I was not surprised. I did not think Ryan would be kept after this year. I thought they would give him through the entire season just because we haven't seen Towns and Russell play together at all. What, 5 games, Mike?
5, yeah.
And so I thought there would be, as much as Ryan looked overmatched by the job and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't ready. The team was floundering. I thought they would say, okay, let's at least let him have Towns and Russell together for however many games. And then I didn't think it would change much. I think they would still be in the market for a new coach. So the timing surprised me. I got to be honest with you. I thought it was very low class to hire an assistant off another team.
Has that ever happened before? Have you ever seen that?
I'm sure it's happened somewhere. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
I thought if you're gonna make a change, let David Vanterpool coach the team the rest of the year. That Chris Finch was still going to be there. Nobody was going to hire him this year. So I think it shows that there was some scheming going on behind the scenes. This wasn't like he fired Ryan and then picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Chris, you want to coach?" No.
Yeah.
Talking about this, I would say at a minimum for a week, and they can spin it however they want. But this has clearly been something that's been in the works because you just don't do this at the snap of a finger. So I thought that was not a very classy move by Gerson. Guess what? You're on the clock, Gerson.
Yeah.
Think about this, Mike. They hired him in May of 2019.
Yeah.
So we're not even 2 years into this. And this franchise, the front office is all different. The roster is all different. The coaching staff the coach that you hired at the time. Now, whether you could say Glenn Taylor made him hire him or whatever, you still signed off on it. So everything about this now is Gerson's. It's on him. And so.
Yeah. And that's the biggest question. That's kind of question number one I wanted to get to in this kind of rundown is his vision the correct one? And is this going to work here? Because you kind of got all the pieces he wanted now. You went and got D'Angelo Russell. You had to pay a lot to do it, including what could end up being a pretty valuable draft pick this year. You got your hand-picked coach. You've remade the roster. You're playing the style he wants to play. Will this work?
Does it ever work with this franchise?
Occasionally.
I will say this. If they somehow get into that top 3 pick, I'm taking a point guard, and I would move Russell. I know he scores a lot, but he plays no defense. I think I would move him and try to get a point guard.
There must have been a reason that Russell or that Rosas is so enamored with him, though. He must see something in the way he wants the offense to function to make him think that Russell and Towns together is going to get it done. But you're right. We haven't seen evidence of it because they've only been on a court for 5 games together. So we still need that prove it. But what we've seen of Russell has been underwhelming.
Well, what did he see in Ricky Rubio to bring him back at $17 million?
Rubio he was better, in different places, but he's not been good here. He's been a little bit better since he's been starting, but
I think it's been a disaster, to be honest with you.
His best moves so far seem to be kind of the fringe moves, not the home runs.
Correct. Yeah. So this is, I think the clock, it started in 2019, but I think it absolutely starts now. And Towns came out after the game Sunday night, and I don't know what the question was. It was just about the game or whatever. He started talking about legacy, and he wants to build a legacy here, and he's loyal, and this is where he wants to be. let's see if that happens, you know, because eventually in this league, when guys get sick of losing, they want to go somewhere else. And so I feel like the clock is starting to tick faster for him too. Because Mike, how many years are they going to waste of his talent?
Yeah.
And that's where you feel like you're just wasting. Now he has to take some ownership of that too, Towns, and he has been better defensively. And you know, I wrote early before the season started, he was the worst defensive center by those metrics before the season. I think he's been better this year.
Yeah,
he played a lot, but this is about, to me, Gerson and Cat, and you have to get this thing going quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to hit on a few other subjects here. We've talked a lot of Wolves on this podcast the last couple of days, so let's move to Twins, because you know we're going to get some spring training games here in a few days. We see what the roster is. We know the 0-18 playoff streak.
Yeah.
You've written a little bit about this already this year. I guess the question on everybody's mind is, you know, can they get back to the playoffs? I think they can. I think that's not a hard, that's not a heavy lift with this roster. You still know kind of what you got. The bigger question is this going to be any different once you get to October, assuming you get in the playoffs?
I think they're at that situation, Mike, until you show you can win a playoff game. How in the world are you going to pick this team to do anything in the playoffs when you have that streak? And I do think, I know going into last year they said, oh, that's someone else's history. That's not our history. But guess what? You get asked about it and you carry it around. It's part of your fabric.
Now that they've lost 5 of those games, that's part of their history.
It's part of your history. And so whether they can add, you know, during the season, if Maeda can come back and come close to duplicating what he did, he's your ace. And I think you would say that he's an ace, right? He needs to do it again 2 years in a row to say that this guy is a true ace, right?
Yeah.
It would be nice to find someone that's in that Barrios category. So it's like a 2-3 and not just a veteran that you plug in and say, okay, he's a solid 5, you know?
Right.
I don't know. The bullpen is intriguing on paper, but how good is it going to be? You might need to add somebody there depending on how that group holds up. I think the lineup they'll play better because if they're healthy. I mean, I think the injuries and in and out and just the absurdity of how weird that year last year, I'm a little bit willing to give a pass on the hitting last year because it just wasn't good, right?
No.
So I think the lineup will be good. I think it'll be productive. But I still think they're one starting pitcher away from being a legitimate, okay, this team could maybe win, more than win a game, but be legit in the postseason.
Although winning a game would be a nice start. And I think
would be a good start.
I'm in the same boat with you. I think one starting pitcher would make a huge difference. And that's not a move you have to make in February. That can be a move you make in July, or it could even be, you know, someone's lighting it up in the minor leagues and all of a sudden you bring him up and he becomes that guy. We've seen that with some teams, but it's a lot of hoping and waiting at that point. I think the one thing that's intriguing to me about this team is that they seem like they're going to have better balance, because I think they're going to be at least an average defensive team. You've got, you know, Drelton Simmons making shortstop a lot better. You slide Polanco to second. If you get a healthy year of Josh Donaldson, if you get a healthy year of Byron Buxton, if you get Jeffers splitting duty behind the plate, you got the potential for some pretty good defensive spots that you haven't had in recent years.
Oh, I think if all those guys you're saying are healthy, if Donaldson and Buxton in particular, I think they're going to be a lot better defensively. I mean, I think the Simmons move, because you fix 2 areas there, I think he makes them exponentially better. So I think defensively you're going to be better. I think the hitting will be better. So I think to me, it's a flip a coin with them in Chicago in the division. I think they'll probably have to the wire. But it's the one thing we can't factor in is how much does that 0-18 weigh on you mentally? And, you know, are you squeezing the bat sawdust out of it because you're feeling the pressure of finally getting over that hump? I don't think you can discredit how much that affects the team. I really think, because what's going to be the narrative when, you know, if and when they get into the playoffs? That's going to be the talker.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And it's, you know, assuming there are some fans in the stands this year, if they got to October, there would be that tension at Target Field whenever they were playing a playoff game. It'd be like waiting 100%. For the worst to happen, not hoping for the best to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel the nervous tension when something like that is hanging over me. And so, you know, that's where, you know, you hope your veteran lineup, but their veterans just, you know, they didn't play well in that Houston series. And And we talked about, the home runs and everything is fun. And it's, a great storyline and all that. But as we saw in Houston, you have to have a plan B. They have to have another way to win, and they didn't have it last year.
100%. Let's jump around to two more topics. Number one, Gopher men's basketball. They play Thursday. They've got a few more regular season games in which to try to impress the NCAA tournament committee, and for Richard Pitino to try to impress that he's done a good job here. What do you see with this program? Are there major things afoot, or do you think they get into the tournament and and level this thing off at a certain degree?
Well, after the bad loss Saturday, the bracketologists still have them as one of the last four in. So they still see them as a tournament team, even though they haven't won on the road and they've had some really lopsided losses, and they were just so completely uncompetitive against Illinois. And now they're beat up. And the thing is, they have 4 regular season games left, but they're not, it's what Penn State and Northwestern and Rutgers. So it's not, they don't have that chance to knock off a marquee opponent. So I guess they'll still be, as long as they, don't lose it to one of these teams that it's a bad loss. They can't afford a bad loss right now.
Yeah.
So I assume they'll still be a tournament team, but is that going to be enough for Mark Cole to say this program's going in the right direction? I don't know. He's not going to tip his hand. That's, Mark Cole stays in the background. You don't know how much the effect of the pandemic would affect the buyout, and do they have the money to do it? Or, or is he just at a point where he feels like this program's spinning its wheels a little bit? Because these late season slides happen a lot. This is not just the first time it's happened. And so I tend to supported Pitino probably more than the average fan, because I don't think you can just discount how well they played against Michigan or Ohio State. I mean, those teams are, really good teams, Final Four caliber teams, and the Gophers, and they didn't catch them on an off day or whatever. They just took it to them and outplayed them. And so to say that there's been no good, I don't think is accurate. They've beaten 5 ranked teams. So the lack of consistency and just the ups and downs and ebbs and dramatic swings in performance, what we've seen from this team, that to me is the most frustrating thing.
We've seen a lot of off-season quarterback movement already in the NFL. We saw the big Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade a couple of weeks ago. We saw the Carson Wentz trade last week. If you are the Minnesota Vikings, which you're not, you're Chip Scoggins, but if you are the Minnesota Vikings, you're Rick Spielman, you're sitting there, you've got 2 more years of Kirk Cousins under contract, but you also have a roster that's getting a little bit older. You've got a defense that probably needs some, not just better health, but some retooling. Are you intrigued at least by considering a trade market with Kirk Cousins?
I think you're not doing your job if you don't call Houston and see what it would take to get Deshaun Watson. I don't know where the Wills are yet, but this feels like, Mike, to me, a make or break type season for the Spielman-Zimmer regime.
Yeah, it feels that way to me.
If they don't make the playoffs, I would not be shocked if you have a complete change, right? And so if you're those 2 individuals, do you want to – now, if you get Deshaun Watson, I think you do it but at what cost? But short of not getting him and you're just trading somebody, would you want to have a young quarterback when you feel like you have to have a big season like this to continue forward? If I'm them, I think they're probably content with, you know what? We know what Cousins is. He had a good year. You bring all those people back, all the key players back. If we can just fix the defense, I think that's probably what their mindset is right now, because I don't think they can go through. They're not in a situation, and it wouldn't be a rebuild if you brought in a new quarterback, but it would be a change, and any kind of change, you're not sure what you're going to get. So I think they would be more inclined to say, no, let's just roll, come back with what we have. Is
that more out of self-preservation than it is out of the best idea at that point?
There probably is some self-preservation going on. And I think in Zimmer's mind, because everything he said this offseason is, I love this offense. Whatever they did last year, it's the right thing to do.
Run it back.
Fix the defense. Fix the defense, and then we'll be fine. I don't know if it's as simple as that, because I think the offense it wasn't a top 10 scoring offense, so you can't say it's a great offense. It
was an efficient offense. It was certainly better than
it was pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good. I'd say we'll say it was pretty good, but it wasn't great because you weren't top 10 scoring. And so to think that everything is just okay with the offense, I don't agree with that. The defense was a disaster. So they do have to fix that. So I think it's a combination of their belief that the offense has the components to be good. And if they can fix that defense, that makes them another playoff team. So it might be a little bit of both self-preservation and the belief that, hey, if we can just shore up the defense, we're right back in the mix to contend for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think ultimately the place they're at, even though if they were at a different place in this regime, I feel like a trade this offseason might make a little bit more sense because it does, you can make it work salary-wise, and maybe you've kind of seen what your ceiling is with Kirk Cousins. I don't know if your ceiling is Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. Certainly doesn't seem that way based on what we saw, especially in 18 and 19. But
no, I don't think the ceiling is Super Bowl. But I don't think they're in a position where they want to find out what a new quarterback can do either.
Chip, great stuff. Lots of stuff going on, even though it's the middle of February. We'll have you back on later on to talk about all the evolving sports topics in Minnesota. Chip does a great job. Columnist, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Read his stuff. Follow him on Twitter. And Chip, thanks for joining me today on the Daily Delivery Podcast.
Thanks, Mikey.
On the subject of that last thing that Chip, Scoggins, and I talked about, yes, you just heard the little jingle. That means I feel like a trade machine. On that subject of the Vikings possible thinking about trading Kirk Cousins, we need to bring up the trade proposal that Peter King brought up in his Football Morning in America column this week. Because, guys, I'm starting to feel like any proposed Deshaun Watson trade is starting to feel a little bit like a Herschel Walker trade. And that's not a good thing if you're a Vikings fan. It's a great thing if you are a fan of a team in Texas, such as the Dallas Cowboys for the real Herschel Walker trade, or perhaps the Houston Texans in any Deshaun Watson trade. And look, I get it. Deshaun Watson's a really good quarterback. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Aaron Rodgers, I don't think, but he's really good. He's got the potential and already has shown that he is a top 8 quarterback. At least, I think that's fair to say. I don't know if he's a top 3 or top 5 quarterback, which scares me a little bit. But anyway, my thoughts about his value aside, the value that others are assigning to him is kind of blowing my mind. So here's Peter King's proposal on how he would manufacture a 3-team trade. And again, he only lists a handful of teams in the trade market, the trade sweepstakes for Deshaun Watson. So interesting that he does get the Vikings into the mix pretty quickly. So here's his proposal. I'm just going to read it verbatim because trying to paraphrase this level of trade is too hard. So okay, Peter King's proposal: Vikings send quarterback Kirk Cousins to San Francisco. The Niners send Jimmy Garoppolo to Houston if he'd waive his no trade clause. The Texans send Deshaun Watson to Minnesota. In return, the Niners send their first round pick in 2021 to Houston, and they're out. So San Francisco would be trading Garoppolo and a 1 to Houston and getting Cousins with 2 years left on his contract. The Vikings would send Anthony Barr, running back Alexander Mattison, plus their first-round picks in 2021 and 2023, and second-round picks in 2022 and 2023 in exchange for Watson. Okay, so ultimately Houston gets Garoppolo, 2 number 1s this year, a number 1 in 2023, and 2 second-round picks. And one of those number 1 picks in 2021 coming from San Francisco. So overall, the Vikings are giving up Kirk Cousins, a pretty good quarterback, in a lower tier than Deshaun Watson, even if, certain metrics can show Kirk Cousins, is his equal or maybe even better in certain circumstances. You'd rather have Deshaun Watson. I don't know he's going to argue that. Deshaun Watson has a better chance to get you to the Super Bowl, franchise quarterback possibility, no doubt. But you're giving up Kirk Cousins, who's a pretty good quarterback. You're giving up Anthony Barr, who is, kind of a centerpiece of your defense when he's healthy. A guy Mike Zimmer really, really likes. Don't think Mike Zimmer is crazy about the idea of subtracting from the defense, not adding to it. But you're giving away Anthony Barr. Maybe that helps a little bit salary cap-wise, but you're giving away a really good defensive player. You're trading Alexander Mattison, who is kind of your security blanket at running back, a very good cost-controlled backup running back. You're giving up 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, all of that for Deshaun Watson. Now, of course, the real Herschel Walker trade involved 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks, not 2 of each. and did involve the acquisition of a running back, not a quarterback, different eras. So nothing will ever truly compare to the Herschel Walker trade. But you are starting to wonder, like, this is getting to be a lot, and it's the annoying part of the trade speculation season, right? Where everybody's kind of posturing. Houston in one sense is planting stories, I'm sure, where, the GM the other day is saying, we don't intend to trade Deshaun Watson, all the while they're also, creating these kind of markets for him by planting stories other places and, trying to pump up his trade value. So we're in the annoying part of any phase of a potential trade. The fact that this keeps getting talked about so much, especially by someone like Peter King, leads me to believe that there's certainly some fire where there is this smoke. But what is it? How much? Where are you left now after that? You don't have a couple first-round picks. You don't have a couple second-round picks. The cap, maybe you get a little help if you do the bar part of the trade, but you're also out. If you're trying to fix the defense, if you think the defense is the thing that really needs to be helped, all of a sudden you don't have a premium pick in a bunch of these drafts, a bunch of premium picks, and you don't have your star linebacker in the mix anymore, and you're out a running back, and you're out a quarterback who, I think if we're being honest, you wouldn't mind getting out from underneath with those last 2 years of the contract. The money works. You don't got to worry about the money in this case with the Deshaun Watson trade. We've talked through that. The money all works. It's just the amount you're giving up. Kirk Cousins, Anthony Barr, Alexander Madison, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. I don't know. As famous philosopher and football coach Tim Brewster used to say, if you want to get some, you better bring some. But that's a lot to bring for Deshaun Watson, a quarterback who I like, but I don't know if he's quite in that tier where you just unload the truck and do anything you have to do to get him.
Hit me with a hot one.
So all the shakeup with the Wolves in the last few days, which started with Ryan Saunders getting fired right after a loss to the Knicks, and Tom Thibodeau, their new coach and formerly the president of basketball operations and head coach of the Timberwolves, reminded me of this take from Jibber Jabber a few days ago that he sent me. This isn't much of a take, he says, because it's become painfully obvious, but when the Rockets offered 4 first-round picks for Jimmy Butler, the Wolves should have taken it. I've always been on the fence on this one, because for as bad as Houston is right now, and I think those picks would have been, they'd have had to stagger those picks. You can't do them in consecutive years, so it would have been like 2021, 2023, 2025, and 2027 or something like that. So, that's hard to think about in that context. And Thibodeau is never going to do that, because he realized that he wasn't going to be around probably for much or all of that, certainly to see those picks convey. But the part I struggle with that is, if the Rockets had Jimmy Butler, I don't think they'd be nearly as bad as they are right now at 11 and 18. I don't think they would have given up on this path they're on. It's possible they would have at some point, and those picks would have become more valuable. But if you have a Jimmy Butler on your team and you keep James Harden on that team, you're probably going to be a playoff team every year, and those picks are going to be in the high teens at best, and maybe in the 20s. So I don't know how valuable those picks ultimately would have been. So I'm going to say probably should have taken that. First round picks have value no matter what, but in the end of the day, I don't know if that would have been as great of a move as everybody thinks it would have been. Let's end with the cooler. We got to talk about Tiger Woods, even though I don't exactly know what to say other than his car accident on Tuesday sounds awful. What we're hearing about the injuries to his legs, open fractures, comminuted, which means the bone is broken, according to ESPN, into more than 2 pieces. An open break means there's a break in the skin. I mean, there's fibula, tibia. It sounds just terrible. I'm sure we'll find out more about what happened in the crash in weeks to come. I guess the sporting context doesn't really matter right now. We can talk about his legacy at a certain point when we know more about what kind of recovery he might make. But just for now, it sounds so awful. And I guess my only big thought is hoping for a recovery, which sounds very bland, but that's all we can do right now, right? It sounds so bad that all you can do is hope for the fullest possible recovery. That will do it for today. Brock Vereen, former Gophers defensive back, will be on Thursday's show. This is around the time the NFL Scouting Combine normally would be. Instead, it's a lot of virtual stuff this year, but Brock is going to take us through the NFL Combine and draft process from his perspective. He went through it 7 years ago. What is that process like? What do you learn, and what are the highs and lows of being a prospect trying to get drafted? So that'll be a really fun show on Thursday. I think Chris Hine will be with us on Friday, and a lot of good stuff coming up next week as well. Listen to this podcast as much as possible. Please subscribe, write a review, and we'll do this all again tomorrow. Thanks for listening today to the Daily Delivery Podcast.